Well, hello everybody. How are you? This is an interesting and new type of episode we got here for you today. I'm joined here by special guests Cameron and Sarah. This is my brother and my sister-in-law. How are you guys doing?
We're doing awesome.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Me as well. Glad to have you guys on. You guys may not know Sarah, but those of you on the YouTube channel, if you like my thumbnails, you can give credit to Sarah for giving me the original template and idea. So they were born before she came along. I want to start off with an opening question, and this will also give us a chance to know you guys. But what this conversation about today is kind of your guys' background and thoughts on small groups, your experiences, what your church does, so that other people in groups have ideas for strategies and best practices. So here's our first question to kick us off, and it'll help us get to know you a bit more. So, and I always say on the podcast with Kaylee as my host is like, we are normal Christians. None of us went to seminary. We're not pros or anything like that. We're not pastors. So tell us a bit about your journey as a couple or as a family, your church, and your level of involvement over the years. Just kind of
It's a good question because it involves a lot of our story and how we got together and everything. Got to meet Sarah at church in small groups.
there you go.
So, I mean, for your viewers, that's where you
Mhm.
got to go find your spouse, obviously. But no, our church does small groups, always has done it. And so when we were both in college or college age, I would say, because we were both graduated at the time,
Mhm.
we were meeting together in small groups once a month. All the small groups on that night, they meet together. So they call that a discipleship community. So any Tuesday night small group, once a month, they get together. And so when Sarah's group joined our discipleship community, I went and introduced myself to their table and try to just be friendly. And that's kind of where it all started.
Sarah, what was your first impression of Cameron coming over?
I feel like you remember me telling this.
I don't know if I know that story, but I could just imagine.
Okay, well, yeah, my small group was new to their DC, so we were sitting down. He came over, introduced himself. He's wearing a black t-shirt, and he sat down at our table, and my first thought was, hmm. and then and then I watched him talk to someone that I would say took a lot of grace to talk to, and I just was thinking, wow, he has a really good patient heart. And I went home that night and I knelt down beside my bed and I told God, I met a cute boy today. And that's all I was trying to tell God. But in my head, I heard, that's your husband. And I was like, okay, God, but wait, I feel like I maybe just heard this in my head. And I'm like, is that you? And then I heard it again. That's your husband. I'm like, okay, Father, forgive me. But I just need to know, is this me? Is this you? And I heard it a third time and I went to bed, slept like a baby. And I was like, okay, that's my husband. And then a year and a half, God told him.
A little longer, but
A little longer.
we're slower on the ears. I'm glad you shared the bit about meeting your spouse at small group because that was our story as well, was college group. And that gave Alyssa, who's kind of more shy, reserved, introverted, finally
Yeah.
build up the courage to not come and talk to me, but throw a pillow at my head to start the conversation. So whatever works.
I didn't know that.
And then you've also hinted at some stuff that we're going to get into about how your church um, does small groups. Before we get into how your church does it, through all your and in this conversation, if I share anything, if you guys share anything, we're being very broad. We're not going to try to like pinpoint any specific person or group or church. So we'll just kind of speak generally about things. Um, why do you see small groups as important for the growth of a Christian and for the growth of a church?
You want it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I mean, they are very important for both. Community, I would say, is one of the big ones. being in community with others. It's funny, before you asked, or maybe recently, we're doing our topic in small groups now on experiencing small groups. Like, what is it? What is the point? And the text I covered was in Acts 2, talking about the disciples gathering together, being filled with the Holy Spirit, sharing all the things that they had in common and giving to the poor. And there was nobody left without need. And it's just like, kind of stems from that for our church is we're supposed to be in community together. We're supposed to be praying with one another. We're supposed to be having dinner and food and sharing time and getting to know one another. And so there's that big community aspect for just your spiritual growth, being in a small group, being able to be around people that are, kind of, we wouldn't say you have to be in the same age group, but a lot of times that's just ends up what it is. There's mostly college group, young married couples, then there's kind of older groups. Not to say that you couldn't join any of them really, but it's good to be with people where you're in the same stage of life. So as you're learning and growing, as you're trying to experience what it is to follow Jesus in that stage, the other people are doing the same thing.
And I've always found that incredibly important for groups, because our normal Sunday gatherings, depending on how your church operates, doesn't always allow for that, because some have multiple services. So it's like, come in, do the service, and we're out. It's also typically more tailored for a newcomer. So just kind of be like low level, no crazy buy-in. But the small group, just like you brought up the Acts story, is like where you can do all those other things. And we've seen in our small group a lot of those life events happening, people in need, dinners and parties. Yeah. You mentioned culture, or maybe I just thought of culture as you were talking about community building. Have you guys ever, is your church very explicit about the groups as a way to develop the culture of the church? Or is it?
Well, there's a system to our small group. Like we have when you're a small group leader, you're kind of taught that what works is sharing a meal and then casting vision for like what your aim and the purpose for meeting together is. So I remember one, he's now a pastor. His vision was that he would share every single small group was, guys, if we're doing this right, if we're following this book, then we should either end up dead or in prison, because that's what happens to the men in this book. And, and it just kind of sets the tone for what a life after Christ is like. And and when Cameron shares vision, it's, hey, we're supposed to be in community with one another. We're supposed to be, sharing the real stuff going on in our lives so that we can help each other. Right. And so I think that helps with building that culture.
And like that. So to play off of what she said and kind of what you're talking about earlier, on a Sunday, there's maybe not time, or you're out in front of hundreds or more people. So if you're sharing something deep and might bring you to tears or cry, now you've got this element of other people watching, wondering what's going on. But in someone's home or in a more isolated incident, it's really easy to develop that and be a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah. So you've opened up something I'm going to tangent to. You mentioned the leaders being taught about small group, and it seems like it's a consistent thing that all of your leaders share a vision. So that must be something that's being taught or instructed for you guys to work on, develop, and share. So maybe sidestep to that conversation. Is your church intentional about, if you're going to lead a group, you're going to go through a training or you have a mentor? What does that look like?
Not really.
Okay.
We're not really just you come in, and if this is something you want to do, you get to do it. It's more of character developed over time. Is this a gifting for you. They try to identify people with leadership giftings to put in that role. That way just seems to be what God's doing.
Got it.
There is training though.
Yeah, there's definitely we do once a month, we have what we call small group leader training, where they're just touching base with us. Hey, this is kind of where we're at. This is some things that we're praying for, the things that we notice within the church, and we want you guys to be a part of, you know.
Yeah. And things get brought up like that they might hear, like pastors are touching base with our small group leaders on a weekly basis. Like he'll get a text from our pastor and he'll be like, how did small group go tonight? You know, and then they'll come and they'll visit small group and then they'll give feedback of like, hey, you know, I really liked how this worked, but maybe end earlier so you have more time for hands-on prayer or something. So yeah, there's definitely, I think, someone that you get to kind of coach you, and you're not just on your own.
Right. And I think that's what's piqued my interest. You guys just shared, I don't even remember when, just a little bit about how your small groups work. And it seemed very intentional. And so them coming in just to like observe and not be a critic, but like, hey, here's a little move you can make to enhance your group. And that's something I have a passion for as an educator, and being an instructional coach and all that stuff is like, I would love to join another group, and I've done that with some people in my group, is let them lead, meet with them some other time. Like, hey, I noticed you did that. That's actually a teaching skill. And if you intentionally do it this way, you'll get more out of it. And so I like that your church is doing that. Which leads great into our next question, which is more about the actual structure. So how does your church structure small groups? And I'm thinking specifically like, and you mentioned a couple times how you meet, I'm assuming weekly, and then once a month you have that get together. And what are the benefits and pitfalls from your church's strategies?
Well, I'll go over structure stuff. So they've got like a 2-year outline basically of different topics that rotate. So 24 different topics that we'll go through, you know.
One topic a month.
Yeah, one topic a month. We'll cover it for that month. So it could be like right now it's experiencing small group, but it could be the Holy Spirit. It could be truth in the Bible. It could be Jesus's life. Yeah, tithing. How does God want you to treat your money? Those things. And so you spend the whole month diving into that topic. And usually at the once a month meeting is when they introduce that topic. The pastor preaches on it. And then, so we meet at church for that. We share a meal there. We do worship. We do communion. We pray for one another. And then it's very similar through small groups, except not at the church. We meet in someone's home. Is the most ideal place. If that's hard to find, then they open the church. You could go and do your small group in the church. It's just whatever you can find available. Some groups do that and have childcare at the church, which works great. But yeah, so then we meet once a week. Our group is a Tuesday night group. And then we eat and hang out for the first 30 minutes. I kind of cast vision, any specific announcement type things that would be good for whether it's group specific or, hey, the church, just remember this event's coming up. This is why that is important to go to that event or be a part of that event. And then kind of talk about the topic, why that's important. That's kind of in my vision for the night, even. Then we go through a text. And so throughout the week, you know, I'm coming up with the text, the questions, well,
and sometimes we're supplied like a sample text that he can. So if like he's like, this was a busy week, I'm just gonna use the sample text, you know, or they're given some liberty to say, I really feel like the topic is tithing, but what my group needs this time is we really need to focus on healing, because there's a lot of that are having sick kids or whatever. And so like,
Sure.
we just want to, do that. And so, yeah, it's nice that you get kind of to pick what works for you that season.
And it's cool that you got that flexibility to either choose, hey, I can just use what they've given, or spend some time and really make it your own, which is really cool. So then in a typical group, how much percentage-wise or minutes-wise would you say is you kind of sharing the theme topic versus opening for discussion or reading? What does that look like?
Well, my ideal time is about 20 to 30 minutes, eating, hanging out, socializing before. That allows people that get there a little late or whatever. They don't get to miss what some of the important stuff is. Usually about 50 minutes to an hour in the text asking questions. We spend the last 20 minutes praying for one another.
His portion is, I would say, minimal. Like, he'll go over, this is what we're talking about, the text that we're going to jump into. There might be an icebreaker question that like applies to the text to kind of help you set the scene, get in. And then he'll ask a question, and then everyone else is discussing. And so he's just leading to stay on topic. But even with that, I would say we used to, when we were in a college group, have the core of that college group, the regular attenders, the people that you were plugged in, would meet like 15, 20 minutes before small group started to pray for the small group. And those people who weren't the leaders of the small group, but they were kind of the core of the small group, were coached to say, hey, how you can better help people that are new in discussion is like comment on something that they say, And so then it's not just the leader, but then it's other people within the group that are responding to people and what they're saying. And so then it really feels like more natural, but also still intentional and wanting, people to experience God.
Yeah. Me as a natural talker, but leading a group, it's like, I limit myself to, if I'm going to share something, I need to connect it to somebody. And if possible, throw it to somebody else. Like, hey, don't you have thoughts on, try to do something.
That's good.
So it's not about me, but lifts what somebody else says, maybe connect it to some other idea.
I'm going to
yeah. I limit myself. It's like only comment unless I'm like switching the gears to a new topic. Like, how can I want to share, but let me bring it. So that's really cool. Let's move to, I think I had, hold on. So you're meeting weekly, then once a month you guys have that leadership meeting. Does the rest of the families who aren't leaders, they have that week off, or are they having a different event? Or is that on a separate date?
Yep, separate night. Okay. So would be a Friday or whatever day a month we meet as the leaders.
Okay.
And that's also a time for us to get poured into. We run dry too. Yeah. We need time spent being able to worship and get prayer from people that are close to us. And so it's also just a really good time for us to connect and get refreshed and get poured into from pastors or other small group leaders. And so it is kind of a beneficial thing for us to it's kind of like a small group for us, honestly.
Right. Definitely.
Well, I think we're reaching towards the end. I got one more question, but then if there's other thoughts or areas I didn't think about to ask, feel free to share that as well. And this one's a bit more selfish, so there might not even be an answer to it. But if I were to tailor make a study for your church to fit your style, what would that study look like? It sounds like it'd have to fit a 4-week chunk, because that's how yours typically run.
Yep, a 4-week, usually on months that have 5
Mhm.
Tuesday nights in it, we'll do a hangout or a party for one. And that
Mhm.
helps one bring community, two give an open kind of hey, this is a good thing. You can invite people to it. It's not like a
Right.
super thing. We're just grilling out and
Mhm.
XYZ. And so that's pretty nice. Um, Another thing I'd mention, I don't know if this tailors to this question or before, but we're very watching your podcast has been cool because you dive into all the deep nitty gritty stuff, and that's really neat and fun. And I love doing that even on my own. It's not our small groups aren't really that, which I'm not saying your videos are doing that, but we're very application based. Hey, how do you apply these things to your life? How do we take this topic? Here's the text that backs up that topic. How do you go through your week and your month actually trying to change certain areas of your life so that it does look more like Jesus? It does look more like the disciples in the Bible. So the questions or information, if you were tailoring it to our church, would be very application based to whatever that topic would be.
Yeah, I mean, they're intentional to say they're not Bible studies, it's Bible discussion. And, and the intention of
So that,
we're on mission,
yeah.
like we're
Well, even if
always,
you have a newer person in that doesn't know much about the Bible, now you're not
yeah, that is,
ostracizing them.
Right.
What's this deep question into Mark that you wouldn't know because you've never read the Bible? Well,
and
you're not getting answer from the new person if they don't
that
have
is,
any context.
that's part of just what our church felt funded on, though. Like from the beginning, when our church was first created, they prayed and they felt like they heard from God that this is a church for the unchurched, for people that didn't grow up in church and don't have that foundation. And so they very much structured in a way, just trying to honor what they felt like God was asking of them.
I was
So,
just cruel and I made my people do homework. It's like, all right, and here's the reading for next week. It's
yeah,
like,
Well, it's
but
not
they
like a bad thing.
but
no,
they
it's not. And well, depending on the study. So, and I tried to do every other week. So one week it was like we have homework this week, and the next we did something different, so it wasn't
yeah,
overbearing.
I think that's
Um,
I usually
and,
have, maybe not always, but sometimes there's a hey, here's the challenge. Pray for somebody on a Sunday at church,
mhm,
or invite somebody this month, or
yeah,
whatever is related to the topic.
yeah.
yeah.
I try
Uh,
to tack on something of actionable.
mhm.
That's what we're getting at.
When I led a women's group, I always gave them a challenge.
Oh, there you go. I
It's
always
the
do
yeah,
challenge or, and when we were like really into my studies, it was, hey, I know we're all busy. So it's like, if you didn't do the reading, still show up because you'll get something from the discussion. If you
yeah,
just kind of had enough time to skim, you'll still get something. But like the more you put into it, you'll get more out of it. So that's how it's structured. So it's not to
sure.
penalize, but like, hey, if you want to keep digging, you're gonna find more.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I like how your church's direction is you're definitely gonna have better attendance, and especially since you guys meet weekly and consistently. I assume a few breaks for holidays, but otherwise it's just
Depends on when the holiday falls.
right.
We're meeting Tuesday. That's Christmas Eve this year. No.
Okay.
well, it depends on the community within the small group too.
Mhm.
Like when we were in college small group, and we were newly married and there was 20-25 college students,
Mhm.
they wanted to hang out all the time.
Right.
And we had a house, so they wanted to hang out all the time at our house, which was cool, and it was easy way
Hmm.
to invest in college students. Now we're married with 4 kids, and people in our group have kids, and life gets a little bit busy. And even just last Tuesday, one of the guys in our group was like, I just think that we need more community with one another. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, it was easier when we were young and didn't have kids, but we still need to be just as intentional to meet with one another in homes. Like we were literally reading that text, and and so we were talking about, like, how do we navigate that and fit that into our lives when we're seeing these people every single week.
Yeah.
Which seems like a lot, but when it's in a structured environment like that, it doesn't feel as authentic. It's easier for people to kind of leave if they are like, oh, I'm not getting what I feel like I need to out of this small group. They can just leave because it's this very kind of formal event. Whereas when you have someone in your home for dinner and it's just them, and you say, before you leave, we're going to pray for you, you know, that feels a lot more intimate. And I think that there's a lot of good that comes from that. So,
Yeah. And so I'm putting myself, if I was in your situation, you know, you're only able to try to expand those intimate connections to so many people. You can't do that with everyone in your group, but you could be like, all right, we're going to focus on this family for the next 3 months or whatever. But then I would be looking in my group, who are my next leaders? Who are my
right.
people in my group? And to coach them up, like, hey,
Yep.
who would you want to like partner with and invite to dinner at your house? And that would
Yep.
be like the challenges I would give to a person I know is like on their way up. And that
Yes.
way you can get those intimate connections happening outside of
We
group.
also do this interesting thing called group multiplications.
Yeah.
When that happens, when there's kind of an identified next leader and there's
Yep.
somebody that is God's kind of putting there for that role,
Mhm.
and you have 20 people in group, well, we're going to take that group and put it into 2 groups so that we
Yeah.
can maybe start again,
Yep.
pouring and growing.
And you can
So
always tell when the person shares in group and everybody's like, oh, I really like what blah blah
Yeah.
said. You know, and then they
Yep.
lead group, like, group was great, you know, and you're like, all right, that might be the next one.
Yeah. That was always my heart. I was training up another guy and he could have done fine with the group, but I was trying to like get him to see the way that he would teach so that he knew what he was doing and put a name to it and strategize off of it. And then he left the church. It was like, we're still friends though, because he's a great guy. But um, last question, just because it came up a bit. So I know like college group would be a lot of people more so, but like family groups, what's the numbers look like in terms of attendance? Like what's allowed, and then what's like, well, that's too many people, or what's that sort of look like for you guys?
there really isn't a limit. I mean,
Well,
there's an ideal.
there's a
Mhm.
lip.
I would say on average, most of our young married couples groups range from 8 to 16.
Mhm.
16 definitely being on the larger end, most of them being around 10 or 12.
Yeah.
College groups, I think currently here are a lot smaller, maybe 8 to 10 on average. And then, you have outlier groups that are like a 20-person group, or, just because like, for us, our youth group nights are Wednesday. And so if you've got kids in youth group, well, that's a great night to have a small group because you're dropping your kids off, then you're going to your small group. And so some of the times those groups get heavier just because of what's going on in the church.
Yeah.
So,
And there's a limit because it will quickly, if the group gets too big, it will quickly turn into a Sunday type thing, where the people can come in and they cannot say anything and they can, just leave without ever really making a connection. And that's why, like, for a long time, our church would say 6 and growing, that 6 would be the ideal number and growing, and you're having new people there, and the group isn't stagnant. A lot of times if the group gets to be the same 6 people, they'll shut it down and they'll say, hey, this is not, doesn't seem like a healthy situation for anyone, because our mission here is to make disciples. And if we're not seeing new people coming, then you're just getting too turned inward, and people start to feel it. Like, you kind of get nitpicky on things, and everybody just starts to feel like, small group becomes kind of a chore. Whereas when new people come, it's like, oh, there's life in the group again. And so, yeah, I think that's what we're even like our group now. Like we're like just having conversation with our small group. How do we get more people to come? You know, like we're all feeling the need for it and wanting to do that, and yet life is busy. And how do we do that?
I'm currently in the growing stage because a couple of the families went off and started their own groups, and then people had left the church, and it was just like down to us and another couple. It was like, oh, and we got to start getting some new people in here.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that. And I'd say the one study I have that's closest to what would help you guys or could be usable is I did one on James. And that I wrote that one while our group was like getting to like 16 people. So it was like that larger side. So I wrote it with spots in it where you intentionally do some sort of breakout or turn and talk, some strategy, educational strategy, which you'd be familiar with, Sarah, to make it feel like everyone is sharing. So you're
Yeah.
like, hey, talk with your partner about this question and then do a
Yeah.
share out. And so Alyssa, who doesn't like to share out in big groups, would talk with me and I could say, my wife said something really cool. And now her voice contributed in a large group, even though she didn't have to share. So,
Yeah.
but that's a 5-weeker. So
I've had that like just super randomly where a small group leader would do that. And it's really effective.
mhm.
And I feel like it's neat when you get to kind of change up the monotony of
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, very cool. Thank you guys so much for this conversation and jumping on. I think a lot of churches would get a ton out of this ideas because your church seems very intentional, focused, and I think there's a lot of churches that struggle with small groups. And I think this is a good strategy for them to move forward.
Cool.
Anything you guys want to say before we end the video?
That's the question. You stumped me. The rest of them I had good answers for, but
And you did.
Boy.
All righty.
I'll see you to reach out and to just consider us, and we're excited for what God's doing in you.
I appreciate it. All righty, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great, see you guys in the next video. Bye.